Welcome back to This is VANCOLOUR. Even for those of us who intently follow BC politics, question period in the BC Legislature is not something that most British Columbians are actually watching. And yet the theatrics of question period can be, at times, embarrassing. The heckling and the cheering often devolving into personal attacks and what can charitably be called as childish behavior. But is this just part of the Westminster tradition, or is it a toxic work environment that may require a modern update? Here to discuss is BC's Minister of State for Childcare and the MLA for Victoria Beacon Hill. She is Minister Grace Lohr, and this conversation is supported by Shelter Point Single Malt Whiskey, distinctly Vancouver Island, uniquely Shelter Point. Minister Lohr, thanks so much for being on the show tonight.
Thanks for having me, Mo.
So for the political nerds that may not know this, what exactly is question period in the BC Legislature?
So question period happens every day the House is sitting for 30 minutes, and MLAs from all parties are in the House, and it's a chance for the opposition to ask questions of the government. And as a political scientist, it's a very important part of the political process. You know,
it seems to be a lot like, excuse me, sorry for interrupting. It just seems to be a lot of flexing, a lot of theatrics to an audience of like no one. Like it's maybe the press gallery is watching, but like British Columbians aren't actually watching this debate, right?
The questions part of question period, I do think is an important part of the political process. It's part of our Westminster system. But, you know, to your point about theater, I'd say when I was first elected, I'm a newly elected MLA just from 2020. But early on, I would say it was almost exclusively theatrics, loud and boisterous. But I would see my colleagues motion across the way to let folks know a new question was coming their way, or they wanted to connect outside. You know, but that feeling has changed for me quite a bit in the last little bit.
So how so? Like, explain it to me.
Well, I moved from the kind of back deep corner up front when I became a minister. And I would say that what we have now is nastier. I've seen a rise in the personal attacks, in the interruptions. I've felt a change in question period. And I think, you know, there's work for all of us to do in this political system and in how we engage with each other. But I've seen a bit of a change in tone since Kevin Falcon became leader and came in the House. And, you know, it does matter. Maybe not everybody's watching question period. Maybe nobody's watching question period. But it is the part of our political process that people see most often. It's what makes news clips, for example. And you know who is watching? Every day there are school groups of kids that come through. Yeah. And I look up at them and they're kind of wide-eyed because there we are on the ground of the legislature banging our desks and yelling and interrupting things that would never fly in classrooms or on the playground.
Right, yeah.
Never.
And so, like, I understand your complaints, and obviously the opposition, I think, will naturally have a proclivity towards being aggressive because they're the ones asking the questions. Yeah. But then at the same time, I've seen opposition MLAs also say, you know what, it's also kind of nasty on this end. And sometimes they feel like they're treated unfairly. So I see, you know, an opportunity for bipartisanship to maybe make things more productive. And so why isn't there a push to say, okay, maybe we'll change some rules. Maybe you can't bang on the desk. Maybe you can't, I don't know, interrupt a minister when they're giving an answer. Like, why isn't there a push to make it better?
You know, I think question period can be better, can be more productive. And when questions are asked in a meaningful, well-intentioned way, I do think we see answers that are meaningful and well-intentioned. You know, there was an example this session where a member of the BCUP asked a question about ICBC driver tests being made available in Ukrainian, letting the House know that his constituents and others around the province from Ukraine were taking a test in Russian of all languages.
Right.
And when that question was asked, it got a serious answer from the Minister of Public Safety, and the issue got solved. So there are spaces that it happens. Why I think there's not a more concerted effort in that direction, I think is, you know, it's part of how that place runs. And we've all just kind of accepted it as part of it. And there's name calling and yelling. And I do think, political leadership is really important in tone setting, and me raising one particular example of it is how we started having this conversation of when to call it out, when it goes from spirited debate to unproductive and across the line, I think we have to call it out.
But Minister Lohr, I think you're absolutely right. But that there's going to be people at home watching this being like, you're in government. You can actually change things and maybe reach out to the other side or don't reach out to the other side and say, hey, you know what? We're going to do things differently now. Why aren't you doing that then?
For me personally, it's a conversation I'm having all the time with my colleagues. I do think we have a new generation of MLAs, especially in our caucus, that this is a chance to look at this challenge and think about doing it differently. And, I know that opposition parties are more likely to, be in those spaces using the tools available to them, let's say. And question period is a tool.
Sure.
But I'm at heart a nerdy political scientist, a former university instructor, and the numbers and the evidence of this, I think, matter. And so I looked at it, and they interrupted 371 times in the last session, enough to get captured by Hansard, 5 times as much. There's room, as on our side, there's room and need for all of us to do it. And I really hope that this conversation is part of how we start moving towards thinking what is acceptable and what isn't.
Absolutely. Really quickly, is part of the allure getting in that great rhetorical dunk? And I think anyone who's certainly been on Twitter, I can only imagine what it's like being in that battle rap environment of question period. I feel like maybe that thrill is almost too much.
For me, not at all.
But for others, including your peers, so. I'm sure that exists.
I think yes. And there's an energy at the time of question period. The rest of the day doesn't look like that. I think there's an energy to it. There's some camaraderie to it. But for me, especially when we think about a place that is productive and inclusive, it doesn't hit the mark.
Absolutely. Grace, thank you so much for your time. I really do appreciate it, and keep up the good work in the BC Leg and in question period.
Thanks so much.
Absolutely. Folks, she is BC's Minister of State for Childcare, Grace Lohr. Big thank you to Shelter Point Single Malt Whiskey for supporting local conversations and local content. Now up next, a new poll says that young Canadian adults want socialism, but is that what they actually want? And even if it is, can we fault them in 2023? We'll take a moment up next.